guys, it's Lyndsey. Welcome back to my channel. As you can see, I kind of moved around my spots. I have been taking a little break, enjoying some family time. We have Mardi Gras down here. If you don't know, I'm from South Louisiana, so we've been doing a little celebratory stuff. So the case I'm going to talk about today is the Bever family. Oh, the Bever family. You guys, this case is going to be pretty brutal. So I will issue disclaimers at the beginning of the video that if you are sensitive to blood and gore and brutal murders, this is probably not the video for you. This will be involving children also, so if that's also a sensitive topic for you, I'm just gonna warn you so that way you can choose to continue on or log off. So the family in particular that I'm going to be talking about is the Bever family. It's a large family of 7 children. Yes, you heard that correctly. 7 children. So the father is David Bever. He worked in IT. He had a pretty good job. His coworkers, considered him quiet, kept to himself. He stayed out of trouble for the most part. And he made enough money to support his huge family. Then he was married to April Bever, who had 7 children. So let's just stop and think about this for a second. 7 children living in this household. That's a pretty big family. So I'm pretty sure April Bever's job was to be a homemaker and take care of her kids. It was reported that she homeschooled all of her children. So the ages of the children. So we're going to start with the 2 eldest children, which is the children that's going to be the topic of today's story. We have Robert Bever. He was born September 17th, 1996, and his younger brother, who is 2 years younger than him, he was born in November of 1998. Robert was 18 at the time of this case. Michael was 16. So the children in the Bever family include the 2 eldest, which is what the story is going to be centered around today. Robert Bever, he was born September 17th, 1996. He was 18 at the time of the case. His younger brother, Michael, who was born in November of 1998, he was 16 at the time of this case. Following Robert and Michael, there was Crystal, who was 13, Daniel, who was 12, Christopher, who was 7, Victoria, who was 5, and Autumn, who was 2. So large family. It was reported April homeschooled them all. Literally, this family did nothing outside of the house. It was reported by neighbors that they literally stayed inside of their house all the time. They may have left the house once in a whole month period. They were basically the neighborhood recluses. They only played with each other. They came out in the backyard. There was a park, I think, nearby their house that neighbors and their neighborhood kids would see the kids in the backyard. I think one neighbor said that her kid actually went to the fence to try and get the attention of one of the little Bever children, and the Bever children ran away and went back inside. They literally associated with no one. April and David Bever were very religious. They believed in like an apocalypse that was coming. They read the Bible religiously. They really just tried to shield their children from the outside world. They didn't get involved in any community gatherings. The children didn't even go to school. Like I said before, they were homeschooled. Robert Bever actually went to preschool. He was the only child in the clan that ever went to a school. It was reported by his mother that he was abused in the preschool or sexually abused or something, so she yanked him out. I mean, understandably, right? And she swore that none of her children would ever return to school, so she literally homeschooled them all. They did nothing outside of this house. They didn't have friends outside of this house. Again, I said earlier, April and David were very religious. They believed in an incoming, apocalypse, that people were going to pay for all the sins and evilness in the world, and they just didn't want their children associating with any of that. Okay, but the thing about the outside world, it has a way of sneaking in via the internet. There's a little thing called the internet. So while the children were not allowed to associate with anyone outside of the home except each other, they were able to access literally whatever they want on the internet. They had access to devices, tablets, phones. I mean, the internet was vast in that home. Literally, they stayed home and did nothing all day. They did homeschooling, so I'm assuming one would need the internet to homeschool. So they were able to access anything they wanted. There wasn't any parental supervision, any parental controls on what the content that they were watching. Robert and Michael started to delve into some pretty deep and gruesome interest via the World Wide Web. Robert really quickly grew a really unhealthy infatuation with serial killers, particularly mass murders. He was in particular obsessed with the Columbine shooting of 1999 and the Aurora, Colorado shooting, the theater shooting in 2012 with James Holmes. He had a notebook that he kept underneath his bed, which is going to chronicle the events of today's case, and he would just basically idolize serial killers. He would watch serial killer documentaries. There was a movie that he and his brother Michael, because he eventually recruited his brother Michael into his serial killer fantasy love affair, and Michael developed the same interests, and they were pretty close in age. They were 2 years apart. They shared a bedroom in the house, so they were close. I mean, they literally only had each other. These siblings did not socialize with anyone outside of the home, and I'll get to my opinion on that at the end. I mean, I really just think that created an unhealthy environment all in itself. People need to get out the home and, I don't know, get vitamin C, vitamin D every once in a while. Yeah, it's vitamin D, not vitamin C you get from the sun. But you know what I mean. You need to get out and socialize. You can't just stay locked in the house. And this family would literally stay cooped in the house for days, even months, and nobody would ever see them. I mean, of course, the dad, David, would leave to go to work, but that was the extent of anybody coming out of the home, except for maybe the kids playing in the backyard. Literally, they stayed in this house all day, every day. I've even seen reports where the mom would fuss the kids if they were too close to the window, even like trying to get outside. Like they had to almost beg to go play outside. I mean, it was just a very strange family dynamic. I mean, in my opinion, I think this factored into a lot of the issues that Michael and Robert, of course, were displaying, but we'll get to that later. But Michael and Robert really developed an unhealthy infatuation with serial killers and mass murders, and they eventually wanted to plan out their own mass murder. So Michael and Robert would stay up all hours of the night fantasizing, talking about murders and how it would be to kill somebody. They together watched a movie called Rampage. I've never seen it. I have no desire to see it. If you care to look it up, I googled it and read, kind of what it was about. It's basically a guy that dresses up in tactical gear. He thinks there's too many people on the planet, and he wants to basically kill as many people as he can. He feels like the planet's overpopulated, so I mean, he basically goes into town dressed head to toe in tactical gear, and body armor, and has all these rifles and pistols, and he starts killing people. And I think the guy in the movie killed at least some of 100 people. Michael and Robert took to this movie like glue. They wanted to commit a similar act, I guess, and they wanted to kill, I think their number was 50 people. They had a minimum of 50 people, 50. So they were going to put their plan into action. They eventually went to, Robert started working at a call center. It was a religious call center where people would call in and he would pray with them. Yeah, this boy would pray with people. So he earned a living. He earned a wage by doing that, and he used his wages that he earned from the call center to purchase his tactical gear. Tactical gear included body armor, like a vest, and knives, various knives, because I also want to reiterate that they're under 21. Robert was 18. Michael was 16. They were not old enough to purchase a weapon. But that didn't stop Robert from purchasing guns. Oh no. He went online and purchased guns. Not sure what kind of weapons he purchased. I'm sure they list I think he purchased a rifle, a couple pistols. I mean, it was a variety of guns that he purchased. However, the guns were not going to be shipped at his house. Oh no. He was going to, or someone over 21 was going to have to go to the local gun shop where the guns were going to be sent to, and they were going to have to pick it up. How he was going to pick up the guns, don't really know. He never exactly got to that because you have to be over 21. Robert was 18, Michael was 16. So anyway, they ordered, in addition to the guns, they ordered over 1,000 rounds of ammunition for the weapons. And that was able to be sent to their family home on Magnolia Court in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. I think I forgot to state that earlier. This case takes place in a suburb outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, called Broken Arrow. Broken Arrow is a city of like 26,000 people, I believe. Pretty nice sized city, but not a whole lot of crime happens there. So this crime was definitely one that shook the entire community. So they saw that their ammo was supposed to arrive at their home on July 23rd of 2015. They pretty much had their plan in place. Robert kept like I said previously, he kept a notebook underneath his bed detailing how he was going to commit murders. They meaning he and Michael, had stayed up nights talking about how they wanted to go out and travel the world from city to city. I know they had a couple cities ticked off on their list of where they wanted to visit. Washington State was one of them. You know, Oklahoma, different states, because they lived in Oklahoma. So they were just going to travel the United States and kill just random people. They wanted to kill at least 5 people per state, and their minimum number was 50 people. And it basically came to that Robert and Michael believed, as the character in the movie Rampage believed, they thought that the world was way overly populated, and they wanted to eliminate as many people as they can, thinking if they kill as many people as they can, they may eliminate people who are bad and don't deserve to live. So I guess you're going to sacrifice the good people to maybe get to the bad. I don't know what their thought process was here, except for they wanted to kill and murder as many people as they can. Their goal was to be famous. Their goal was to have a Wikipedia page about them. Okay, so the ammo was supposed to be delivered to the Bever home on July 23rd, 2015. Michael and Robert were excited. They were going to finally carry out a mass murder. Their inspiration came from all the video games that they played. Not that video games create murders. I don't believe that movies and video games create murders. I just believe that in this particular case, with the family dynamics being the way that they were recluses, didn't really socialize outside of home. All they had was the internet, their imagination, and, you know, that was about it. So, I don't know. I think the lines between reality and fake were kind of blurred for these guys, and they just went off the rail, essentially. But they saw their family as a problem. They knew that when the ammo gets to the house, their parents, David and April Bever, were going to intercept the delivery, and their plan was going to be completely exposed. Probably should have thought about that before you ordered it, but anyway. So their genius plan was to commit murder on their entire family. Their entire family. Their plan, which Robert detailed in his notebook underneath his bed, was to wait till the family, you know, simmers down around midnight and everybody goes to bed. I guess they knew around the time when all the family members, I mean, you have 9 people living in this family, so in this house. So, I mean, they kind of, being in the house all the time, knew what time people simmered down and went to bed. And they picked midnight on July the 23rd of 2015 to commit the heinous crime that they committed in today's case. They were going to go to each family member's room and stab them while they slept. According to Robert, they was going to be quick and silent. Watching too many horror movies. But the murder was going to be quick and silent, and they were going to steal the keys to the family GMC. I think they had a Tahoe. They were going to steal the keys to the family vehicle, and they were going to use the family vehicle to embark on their killing, murdering spree journey, whatever. And he detailed all this in his journal, which he kept underneath his mattress. He and Michael agreed that they were going to videotape it. I also didn't note this earlier, but Robert kind of did some stuff on YouTube. It was mostly random stuff. Like, he would talk about different, like, he would do different skits. He had a faux hawk in one of them. He would talk about Minecraft and technology. Basically, he was kind of a gamer. I mean, these kids literally stayed in the house all the time and did not socialize in the outside world. They had their video games and their movies and their devices to, I guess, socialize with. So Robert had a couple YouTube videos. I don't know if I would consider him a YouTuber, but he did have some videos uploaded. He had some video cameras. He and Michael were actually going to plan to videotape the whole thing. They were going to have 2 videos. One was going to be the gory video where they were going to actually video the murders. Oh my gosh, y'all. Who goes there with their brain? Like, I'm going to murder people and then I'm going to video it. But anyway, they had planned to video the murders. One was going to be graphic and showing the actual dead bodies and the gory details. And the other one was going to be kind of G-rated. And Robert was going to post it to his YouTube account. I mean, they really were striving to be famous here. So, incoming July 22nd, 2015, unfortunately, the night of the events of this case take place. It's around 11:30 at night. Crystal Bever, the 13-year-old sister, is in the kitchen. Pretty much everybody simmered down for the night. The dad, David, and the 3 younger siblings, Christopher, Victoria, and Autumn, were all in bed for the night. Supposedly, they were simmering down. I think David was actually sleeping, and Autumn was sleeping. So note that, thankfully, she was sleeping and not downstairs, still awake at this particular hour. So April tells Crystal to run upstairs and ask Robert and Michael to come down and help clean up the kitchen and, you know, pick up the dishes, do the dishes, whatever they were cleaning up, I guess, after having a family dinner. So Crystal does that. She goes upstairs to Robert and Michael's room, and she asks them to come down and help her clean up the kitchen. Robert and Michael look at each other, and Michael says the words, "Shall we just do this now?" As to which Robert replies, "Yes." So, and this is where things get gory. Just disclaimer. Michael calls Crystal over to his computer desk. He says, "I need to show you something on the computer." So Crystal walks over, and as soon as her back's turned is when Robert committed the first attempted murder. He went behind Crystal when she was looking at Michael's computer and slit her throat. Even though he slit her throat, I guess in his mind he thought that it was going to be silent. It was going to be like just like in the movies where you walk up behind someone and you slit their throat and they fall and die. It wasn't this case with Crystal. She screamed. She managed to scream and fight back. So she's fighting her way out of this. In addition to slitting her throat, Robert managed to stab her in the chest, the arm, the back. She's managed to run out the room, y'all. I don't know how she survived this, but this girl survived this attack. She ran out of the bedroom screaming, which alerted April, the mother that was downstairs. She saw Crystal just completely covered in blood, and immediately she freaked out and started screaming. Crystal reportedly ran outside of the house into the front yard, and she collapsed. She collapsed due to loss of blood. My thought is maybe she ran outside to get more help. She knew that the family was in danger, that, you know, maybe if she went out and alerted the neighbors, they can call the cops and do something. That's my assumption, but she ran outside of the front door and collapsed on the front lawn, where she stayed until Michael went back for her. So Michael and Robert ran after their sister downstairs. April was freaking out, screaming. I've read a couple different things. I do believe that Michael was the one that went outside initially and grabbed Crystal and drug her back inside. Robert was calling the shots here. Of course, this was all Robert's ultimate genius plan. Freaking douchebag. But he recruited his younger brother and basically was calling the shots for the entire thing. He told Robert to bring Crystal and drag her back inside. He didn't want the neighbors to be alerted. I mean, there was a half comatose body on the lawn in the front, bleeding almost to death. So of course the neighbors would have seen that and alerted the cops. So he drug Crystal back into the house through the front door and shut the door. And Robert and Michael turned their attention onto their mother, April, who was freaking out, screaming. And they stabbed her 48 times. April Bever suffered stabs in her face, her neck, her torso, her arms, and her back. They really just mutilated their mother. And this was really going to be hard for me to talk about because it's the actual event of the murders. After they finished with April Bever, she's deceased on the ground. They actually leave Crystal alone. They were going to go to finish her off, but she played dead, and I guess they just left her alone. They drug her body inside so the neighbors wouldn't be alerted, and she played dead, even though when they were dragging her back inside, she was kind of conscious, okay? But she did testify that she played dead. So after April was murdered, the brothers turned their attention on their younger siblings, Christopher and Victoria. Christopher was 7, Victoria was 5. They actually went and locked themselves in the hallway bathroom when they heard the commotion and the screaming. And what happened next just makes my gut turn, and it just makes me so mad. It just, yeah. So Michael turns his attention onto his younger siblings, Christopher and Victoria, who locked themselves in the bathroom, and he just does something completely awful and disgusting. He's a terrible, terrible human being for this. He violates his younger brother and sister's trust, bangs on the door, says that Robert is the only one committing the murders, he's innocent, and if they don't let him in right away, he's going to die. So Victoria and Christopher unlock the bathroom door and let him in. When Michael enters the bathroom, he proceeds to stab both Christopher and Victoria to death, 20-something times each. They had stab wounds to their face, both sides of their neck, their torso, their back, and their legs. After Michael finishes with Victoria and Christopher, he then turns his attention onto younger brother Daniel, who managed to find his dad's office and lock himself in his dad's office. And not only does he do that, he actually calls 911. Okay, this is a 12-year-old son. So he manages to dial 911, and the 911 call will be linked down in the description below. The 911 call is completely gut-wrenching. He's whispering very ever so lightly, hello. The 911 operator says, you know, what's the problem? Daniel comes on and says, and whispers, you know, my brother's is attacking my entire family. There was a bit of a miscommunication because he was whispering to the 911 operator. The 911 operator actually thought that Daniel said his dad was attacking the entire family, but he meant his brother. And it's all on 911 recorded audio. And then all of a sudden you hear screaming, which is assumed to be Michael doing the exact same thing that he did to Christopher and Victoria. He's banging on the door, begging Daniel to let him in, that he was scared for his life, that his brother was going to kill him. And you hear a male voice come on the line and say hello, which is believed to be Michael. Then the phone cuts off. Michael breaks the phone, which is supposedly, it was reported that it was actually Michael's cell phone that Daniel managed to grab a hold of to call 911. So after the phone is broken, Robert enters the room, and Michael looks at Robert and says, he's all yours. Daniel was stabbed to death. His neck, face, torso, back of his legs. He did not survive. So after Daniel was fatally stabbed, this is when David Bever actually woke up with the commotion. He was previously reported to be sleeping in bed, and this is about the time that he actually woke up and went downstairs or whatever, wherever his room was. He descended and saw basically the bloodbath that was waiting for him. There was blood everywhere, you guys. This house was completely, the walls, the baseboards, the door handles. I mean, literally, you have to figure he murdered in their room. They started in their room with Crystal. Down the stairs, because she ran down the stairs to exit the house. Mom was going up the stairs when they attacked Mom. And then there was Victoria and Christopher, who was in the hallway bathroom. And then Daniel was in Dad's office. So there was literally blood strewn throughout the entire house. So David was met with that. He immediately charged at Robert, and Robert plunged the knife into David Bever's chest. Unfortunately, David Bever also did not survive the attack. He was attacked in the same way the others were. His face, head, torso, shoulders had multiple stab wounds. Literally immediately after David was stabbed to death, luckily, there was a knock on the door. And I say luckily because Autumn Bever, 2-year-old Autumn Bever, was still asleep in her room. The boys completely did not have time to get to her. They forgot about her. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, is all I can say. There was a knock at the door. Boys didn't answer it. They didn't want a chance at being the police or the neighbors. They didn't want to answer, so they fled. They ran out of the back door, left everything behind. They had a video camera that was found, and literally just fled the crime scene and went into the woodland areas, which was in back of their house. Who's the knock at the door, you think? It was the police. Yeah, you remember the 911 call little Daniel placed? Well, the call was cut off because Michael came into the room and basically committed the murder and broke the cell phone. You could hear the phone when it disconnects that someone was banging it against something. So the call was disconnected, and it was reported that the police actually tried to trace the number in David Bever's phone, to which he never answered. So the police traced the call back to the address on Magnolia Court in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, and they knocked at the door. I mean, they're required to do that as protocol. If someone calls 911 especially with the information that was given on this 911 call, with David whispering help and that someone was attacking his family, like, they couldn't just let that go. It wasn't an accident. I mean, I know my daughter has accidentally called 911, the emergency call button on my cell phone when she was younger. Playing with my phone, she's accidentally hit the button. So it wasn't an accident. They knew that because someone was actually on the phone talking to the 911 operator. So the police traced the number to the address, and they showed up at the address. And when they showed up, they can hear a faint voice calling for help. It was very faint, very raspy. They didn't see anything except for blood on the front porch when they initially walked up to the Bever home, which, if you recall in the story, Crystal actually escaped through the front door and they drug her back in, so the blood was still out there. That's what the police walked up onto when they first got there. In addition to hearing the faint call for help, they decided to break down the door. So police enter the Bever home and immediately are met with Crystal Bever, 13-year-old Crystal Bever, who was covered in blood. I mean, the police absolutely walked into a complete bloodbath, as you can imagine, when they broke down the door to the Bever home. They found Crystal immediately, you remember, because Michael drug her back in. Her throat was slashed. She was barely able to get out the word, help me, help me. And how this girl was still alive, I really have no idea, and neither did the paramedics. Police immediately called paramedics to come to the property, and they escorted her out on a stretcher to be helped by paramedics, where she does survive. She survives. I'm like, oh my goodness, her guardian angel or somebody in the universe was looking out for her, because she survived this attack. And she was able to actually go on to tell the detectives that it was her older brothers who committed these crimes, Michael and Robert. So after they get Crystal Bever out to the ambulance to get treated, they walk up to April Bever, who's, I mean, beyond repair. They immediately are met with April, and then Christopher and Victoria, and then David. All of them were pronounced deceased at the scene. There was absolutely no saving them. They also found little Daniel, who was stabbed to death inside of his father's office, where he tried to phone 911. He was also deceased. Then they continued searching room to room, and basically the police officer said each room was just, I mean, as you can imagine, just a bloodbath. There was blood smeared everywhere, from the bathroom to the hallway to the office to the bedrooms. Everywhere that these boys passed had blood, flesh, body parts. And I say body parts because, like, the guts from the people, I don't mean to go into gory details like that, but you can about imagine the scene that the police officers walked in on. Luckily, the cops showed up when they did, because they spooked Michael and Robert for them to run out of the house. They completely forgot about 2-year-old Autumn. 2-year-old Autumn sleeping upstairs in her room. The cops walked in her room. She was sound asleep in the crib. She slept through the entire thing. She survived the attack without any injuries. Her and Crystal were the only 2 survivors. Crystal was because she was conscious and able to answer questions, she was able to name her attackers as her older brothers. And of course, the police initially issued basically a manhunt for these 2 boys. They saw the back door was ajar, so they knew they had to go out the back door. They couldn't have gone far because neither one of them drove. They fled on foot, so they brought in the canine unit dogs, and they got their scent and found them located crouching down by a creek in the woodland area right in back of the Bever home. Robert Bever came out with his hands up as soon as the police were closing in on them, and police took pictures of the boys when they were arrested. Robert Bever has a face that you just want to punch. He came out smiling from ear to ear, covered in dirt and blood, and you could just see their clothes, both the boys' clothes, when they come out. Michael did not come out there as easily as Robert. They actually had to send the dog in after Michael, and the dog actually had bit Michael's shoulder, and you could see in the pictures that they took of the boys, Michael has bite marks going across his shoulder. Good doggy. Good doggy. So dog brings Michael out. Both boys are out. They take pictures, and you could just see Michael's shirt is torn up. You see bite marks. Their clothes are just covered in blood, and it looks like parts of human flesh. These pictures are super gory. I'm not going to post all of them, but you can find them on the internet. It's disgusting, and Robert has a face you want to punch. This dude is smiling. He's proud of what he's done. So, of course, they're arrested, brought into police station. Robert spontaneously tells one of the arresting officers about all the plans on a flash drive that's inside of their home. Remember, the boys were heavy with technology. They had all these plans written out about a mass murder. He had a notebook. Robert had a notebook underneath his bed of all the plans, and specifically what he wanted to do to the family members, which thankfully all of it didn't go as planned, because in the I guess manifesto or the plan in the notebook, they wanted to chop 2-year-old Autumn's head off with an axe. So I'm just so thankful that as many people that lost their life in this case, 2-year-old Autumn was actually spared, and the cops showed up just in time to spook them, I guess, and they had no chance to even give Autumn a second thought. But they had all these plans detailed in a notebook on a flash drive, which Robert spontaneously uttered to the arresting officers, hey, by the way, all these plans are here, here, and here in my room, and just premeditation. So both boys are arrested on first-degree murder. It was determined it was premeditation. I mean, there was so much evidence, a notebook, the flash drive that detailed all of their plans, so to speak, and as well as there was a video camera found at the scene. Remember I said earlier they were going to video the murder. Now what was found on the video camera, I don't know. Did not locate any of those pictures, nor do I want to see any of those pictures if they took any. However, that was all confiscated by the police. Robert's interrogation was not released to the public, but Michael's interrogation was, and I will link all that below. But Michael basically came clean about the entire thing, about Robert basically being the ringleader, and they just had a plan one day. They wanted to commit a murder and have a Wikipedia page. They wanted to commit a mass murder, go on, you know, like I said earlier, they wanted to take the family vehicle and go to as many states as they freaking could and kill as many people as they can, because they felt the world was overly populated, and eventually killing as many people as they wanted to, they would kill people that didn't deserve to be here. This was according to them. And then when I do this, that means I'm quoting what either Robert or Michael said. Now, Michael's interrogation was released to the public, so you can watch everything that the police interrogated him on. He detailed all the murder. Eventually, he just admitted to stabbing Christopher once. I just stabbed him once, and he tried to pin everything on Robert, but I mean, with all the evidence and the fingerprints and everything, when the labs came back with all the blood, because Michael cut his finger when he was in the middle of stabbing his mom. His DNA was mixed in there just as much as Robert's. So yeah, just stabbing him once, like he was trying to say for Christopher, just wasn't going to fly with the detectives. So Michael did come clean. He told them about the notebook that Robert kept under his bed. He told them about the body armor, which Robert was wearing when he was arrested. I did not mention that, but in the pictures that they snapped when he was wearing a nice little freaking smile from ear to ear, he had body armor that he ordered. I mean, apparently you can get this shit off the internet. You can literally get anything off the internet, which is kind of scary. It's kind of scary, but they basically had these boys found out. I mean, and Robert had no problems admitting any of it. He was proud of what he did. He even said he would do it again if he could. I mean, this guy, I don't even know you can call him a person. He's warped. He's very warped. I think Michael was warped too. I just think he was more or less kind of suckered into it by his older brother. He had idolized his older brother, wanted to be just like him, so he took up the same interest, i.e. serial killers, mass murderers, spree shootings. He took up the same interests as his brother. So when his brother wanted to formulate a plan to kill people, hence his family, because his family was going to get away in the way of their master plan. They were going to find the bullets that were going to be delivered to their home. So they had to get rid of him, and Robert was in on it, and he detailed it all. And I'm not going to get into detail. There's really no need. You can find it all linked below if you want to watch the interrogation, but everything came to light that it was Robert and Michael. Robert was sentenced to ultimately, and they pleaded guilty. I mean, well, Robert pleaded guilty. He was just like, yeah, I did it, whatever, guilty as charged. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Michael pleaded not guilty, and he actually went through a trial. I think the jury maybe deliberated 4 hours, and just the evidence all against him, I mean, they concluded that he was guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 5 life sentences, the same sentence as Robert, only he has the possibility of parole after, I think, 25 years or something. Because of his age, he was a minor. Death penalty was absolutely not on the table for him at the time. So he's serving 5 consecutive life sentences with the possibility of parole, which is scary. The 2 surviving siblings, 2-year-old Autumn and 13-year-old Christopher, actually were adopted by the same family. I read somewhere that they actually changed their names. I really think I would have done the same thing. I mean, this was such a high-profile case. Broken Arrow has never seen a crime like this, probably ever. This was probably the worst, most horrific crime that this city has seen. And it really shook the community to its core. I mean, there was a massive outcry for the house to be torn down and a memorial park be built in its place. You know, they really rallied around the 2 siblings, the 2 girls that survived the attack. I mean, I don't know how this 13-year-old girl survived all of this, being her throat was slit, and she was able to still communicate to police about what happened, and her brothers being involved, and she was able to list everything that happened up until he slit her throat. I mean, it's just, wow. I'm just so happy that both of these siblings were adopted by the same family. They were able to, I guess, be given a chance at a normal life. Meanwhile, their siblings, Robert and Michael, I know for sure Robert has no remorse. I mean,
it's disgusting, this kid's reaction in the courtroom. I mean, he was smiling, laughing, talking to his brother during one of the hearings. Like, he has no remorse in the world. He just deserves to rot for the rest of his life in prison. And so does Michael, but the only difference between the two sentences is that Michael is eligible for parole after a certain point. And that's as far as I know about the siblings. The community has rallied around both of them to keep their life private. They did change their name and their identity, and I mean, basically they're doing well with their new family from what I read. So the Bever home sat abandoned for like 2 years or something after the murder. Again, it was just kind of rotting and molding. The community really just wanted something to be done about it. They didn't want the house in the neighborhood anymore. It was what they call stigmatized, which is a real estate term for a house that probably isn't going to sell because a murder or something heinous, normally a murder, has happened there, and no one's going to want to buy it. I could think of a few other properties. Chris Watts, the Watts house, still up for sale. They haven't sold that house, but that's another story. But then, mysteriously, I think in May or March, I want to say it's March of 2017, the house burns down. Just burns down to the ground. Yeah. The firefighters arrived to the scene. The house is completely engulfed in flames. The entire second story of the floor was pretty much caved in. It was gone. And the cause of the fire was suspected to be arson, but nothing ever came of it. Like, no one was ever arrested for it. No one was caught. I just think it was kind of suspicious that the city basically had a press conference a couple months before the fire that they were going to tear the house down. They actually did decide that they were going to tear the house down and build a memorial park in its place to honor the Bever family. But then 2 months later, the house burns down. I don't know about you guys. I think it's a bit suspicious. So anyway, house burns down in, March of 2017. They don't have to pay any money to tear it down at that point. It's automatically going to get ripped down. Save the community a lot of money by having to tear. That's why I think it's kind of suspicious the way the house just burnt down. I mean, they never arrested anybody for setting the fire or anything. They suspected arson, but no one was ever arrested. I just think it's all suspicious. But anyway, the community got what they wanted. There's now it's called a reflection park in the middle of basically the area where the Bever house once stood. There's a nice walkway. There was a park already kind of in the back of the Bever home, which is where I said previously one of the kids would often see the Bever children playing and try to interact with them, and they would run away. So they basically extended that park up to the Bever property, or reflection park, and there's benches with the Bever family names engraved in them. So the community has really came up with a nice way to memorialize the family. Both brothers are still in prison. They're at 2 different prisons. They weren't going to incarcerate the brothers together. I mean, why would you? They're evil separately, but together they were just completely atrocious. So they are serving their life sentences at 2 completely different prisons. And the 2 remaining siblings were adopted by the same family. Identities were changed. And as far as I know, their privacy has been respected. And the community has rallied together around these 2 to help them, I guess, get through. I mean, can you imagine the counseling these young children must have endured? I can only imagine. I mean, now their whole family, their brothers committed the murder of literally their entire family. I don't know. So now I'm down to the opinion section, where I state kind of just my opinion on the case. I've pretty much covered the case. Michael and Robert were convicted. Gruesome murder. The house was eventually torn down after it burnt down, and the 2 girls moved on. Now, this is where I want to state my opinion about it. You're free to, voice yours if you agree or disagree. I just feel like it's a shame that these children were kept like in a recluse mode to where they weren't allowed to socialize with any other children. None of them, with the exception of maybe Robert, who had like 1 year experience, if that, in a preschool, none of them got to experience what a school setting was actually like. So these children were you could pretty much imagine that they were socially awkward. They probably did not know how to act in public. And David, the father, and April, the mother, probably thought that they were shielding their children by keeping them locked up in the house because they didn't like the world. They didn't like the way that people acted. But you weren't monitoring anything that they were watching on the internet. So they were literally bringing all of these real world ideas into the home via the internet. So this is where parental controls come into play, because as usual, there have been times where children don't always know the difference between a fantasy video game and reality. They want to reenact these, I guess, actions that they see in these movies and these video games. And look, don't come after me. Video games, movies, they're entertainment, right? I know they're fake. Pretty much the average person knows that they're fake. They can decipher what's real, what's fantasy, what's movie, what's reality. These kids who really never had any other human interaction with anyone outside of each other, I mean, I could see where the lines between fantasy and reality would become blurred, because these kids had no intellect of what reality was, because they stayed in this home all the time and the parents never allowed them to socialize with anyone. So they're just living in their fantasy land. So I really think a lot of the home life and the way that these Bevers live their lives just in general and raise their children had a lot to do with the influence of these boys. I'm not okaying their actions at all. I'm not saying that anything is justified for, like, you can't justify killing your family, right? I just feel like they were failed in a sense that people didn't see, first of all, these warning signs sooner. Crystal Bever, the 13-year-old who had her throat slit at the beginning, she noticed the collection of knives that these boys were collecting, which is what they used to carry out the murders. She alerted her parents at one point and said, look, I'm kind of alarmed at the amount of, I mean, these are knives. These are sharp knives, various sizes, different blades. On top of that, she would walk in at different times before the murder, like days leading up to the murder. They were trying on their body armor that they got in the mail. And Crystal voiced her concern to her parents, and her mom replied, boys will be boys. I cannot hate I just cannot tell you how much I hate the phrase boys will be boys. Like, no, disrespect is disrespect and crazy is crazy. I don't care if they're a boy or a girl. There should have been something done about this absurd collection of knives and body armor, and like there should have been more parental controls on the devices that they were using as far as what they were researching online, mass murderers, guns, purchasing weapons. I mean, had the parents been a little bit more involved in this, I feel like they could have stopped this potentially. I don't know if it's just me. You can voice your opinion down below. I just feel like this whole case is just completely sad, completely preventable, and it's a perfect example of why you can't just shelter your kids. You can't just shelter them from the real world, because first of all, you can't shelter them and then give them the internet, because the internet, you can find way more crap on the internet than you can in the real world, because the real world is on the internet. Like, it's mutually exclusive as far as I'm concerned. They can look at a quick Google search and YouTube search and Facebook search and find literally whatever they want to. So if there's no parental controls on that, then you can't tell me that you're sheltering them from the outside world. And I just feel like all of this, in addition to the kids were never in school, so they had no teachers, they had no professionals looking out for their best interests. It was all the mom. And the mom just kind of wrote it off as boyish behavior. Boys will be boys. Well, so that's the story of the Bever family. It's pretty brutal. Very, very tragic incident that took place. These two young girls lost their entire family at the hands of their brother. One of them in particular suffered very, very horrible catastrophic injuries to her throat. I mean, Crystal Bever spent like 4 to 6 months in the hospital, surgery after surgery, to reconstruct her entire throat and abdomen and torso. And pretty much she was stabbed so bad. And I just keep saying this throughout this whole thing. She survived. And God bless them. God bless the little sister that survived. I hope nothing but blessings for both of them. Wherever they're living, I hope they're happy and thriving. And I hope Michael and Robert Bever rot in prison for the rest of their lives, because anybody that thinks about murdering and gets a thrill out of it and goes as far as to like videotaping all the gruesomeness, I just feel like this is a person that should not be free. I don't know. So I do feel like their home life and the way they were raised factored into it, because of all the reasons I listed previously about the internet and whatnot. Let me know your opinions. If you agree, disagree, we can talk about it. The Bever family was, yeah, they were a special breed. And I mean, RIP to the 5 that lost their lives, and many blessings for the 2 remaining siblings that survived the stabbings. And Robert and Michael, that's what I gotta say to that. Thanks for tuning in. If you made it this far, thank you. Please remember to hit the subscribe button. I'm trying to slowly build up my channel. My camera setting and my lighting isn't that great. I apologize, but I feel like if I just post content right now, and I can slowly start improving and tweaking my video quality, so much the better. You never know unless you practice, right? So I would appreciate if you hit the subscribe button. Thank you so much, guys, for coming and tuning in and making it this far in my video, and see you guys for the next one. Bye.